Philosophy and Science Part 3, Dialectical Materialism. In this video, we combine materialism with dialectical view and why that is important. Okay, the dialectics idea was reintroduced by Hegel, German philosopher. Okay, this old philosophy exists in China, Taoism, yin and yang. Okay, so there are many dialectical view existed, but Hegel introduced, but he didn't know what is the driving force of two conflicting matter making a change, and his view was mostly human idea side, and it's probably nothing to do with the nature. Okay, so who emphasized you have to be materialism? This Marx and Engels. They took the Hegel idea of dialectics and apply to make it more scientific. The water boiling actually explain some aspect of it, but nobody keep track of how water was changed. If it's a historic event, it's been keeping record of changes historically. It's called Historical Dialectical Materialism. Okay, so the idea is the history progress based on the dialectic idea, but underlining driving force of the changes is nature. That's materialism. It's not human. Because human think, it's changed. It's the idealism of dialectics that Hegel studied. Okay, now we go through some example. Human recognition process. The human observe the things and classify metaphysics stage and find contradiction. Example is like, hey, how did human born in the beginning? Okay, and mind takes over. Okay, the mind takes over means human mind and nature, they are conflicting, two contradicting aspect, because human understanding doesn't explain the nature, then it's a conflict. Contradiction. Human find a contradiction of the understanding on the nature, and they make a scientific modeling. After Darwin's observation, he find out the species keep changing depend on the ecosystem and environment. It's a scientific model is created. Okay, for example, the planet movement was observed, and sometimes planet go back and forth, make a strange movement, and it's a contradiction of human understanding, because before human believed that those stars and moons, they just go around. It doesn't go around. Sometimes go back and forth. It's very contradicting, and scientific modeling is made, which is a planet model. Okay, and science theory is proposed, like Darwin theories, the evolution, or planet models, and the gravity. And once human create a theory, and at this point, two contradicting item, humans understanding, recognition, and nature, the human recognition is dominant, because human recognition is going to create new theory, the gravity, and conduct some experiment and verification. This is exactly the scientific method, okay? And Darwin theory is verified over and over everywhere. The experiment defies the theory. Material takes over, and experiment. If experiment defies the theory, material takes over and dominant human mind. This part is, if theory doesn't agree with material, the nature, then who lost? Human mind lost. Okay, experiment defy the theories. That means nature is a driving force of the changes. Means nature took over, control again, and human need to develop the new theory to explain it. The materials takes over and dominate the human mind. So who is the driving force here? Okay, the nature is always the underlining driving force, although humans sometimes take over and create the total fancy theories, the physical theories to explain. And nature doesn't provide that. Okay, there is a conflict between human mind, and what is a quantity here? Quantity here is human knowledge. The human knowledge accumulate. In certain point, this quantity is going to produce new theory. So the quality change. And if experiment defies a theory, then contradiction again. Mind takes over. Mind start working on it. This spiral process by contradiction between nature and the human mind is the driving force of advancing and changing science and physics. Okay, so that's the basic, the dialectical materialism. The if nature and theory doesn't agree, then nature always win. So that's materialism, not the, how beautiful the theory is, the theory has to be thrown away. And it may happen sometimes, like somewhere around string theory, it's a borderline, whether it can be, the surviving or thrown away. The multiverse kind of, it's not science, it's just the assumption and theories, and that may be thrown away. It doesn't matter how beautiful the theory is, if it doesn't agree with nature, nature wins. So it's a materialism. Okay, and this materialism increase the quantity, the knowledge of the nature, and human increase the knowledge more, then quality change happen. Develop the new theory like Einstein's and other new theory. Now the big contradiction is the entangled particles, right? Entangled particle you can separate 100,000 kilometers, and it's still entangled. And it's beyond the human theory right now. The human cannot explain that at all. Okay, but no matter what the human thinks, nature is nature. Nature always wins. That's the way it is. Then human need to throw away the existing theory and develop new one. So that is dialectical materialism. And science, the history of science advancement is called historical dialectical materialism. Darwin's evolution, we already talked about this a little bit. The species try to adapt to the new environment due to the change in nature. over many generations, the species change and adapt to the new ecosystem. The increase of population changes ecosystem. Well, here important thing is ecosystem changes species, but what is the contradicting factor here? Ecosystem and species. Okay. Occasionally, species increase population, change the ecosystem. It may decimate the ecosystem, like locust storm, just eat up everything, or population of mice is gonna eat up every food possible, and they change. So the change of ecosystem contradict with species. There is always contradiction between ecosystem and species. Species always try to overcome ecosystem, but ecosystem exists regardless species. Okay, the species thrive again after spilling. After changing or die out. Okay, so driving force here is both ecosystem and species. Economic system. Now, in Europe, we had feudalism, and feudalism is that the nation's king has many king all over. Many king or nobleman is the owner of the land, and all the farmer work on the land. It's a land lease and need to pay tax. So what is contradicting element here? Farmer and the landowner, right? And the farmer need to pay tax. And that's a contradiction. How much tax to pay? Okay. And it has been like that for many generations. Then after Industrial Revolution, capitalism started. It's urbanization. Why? Because the industrial machine can produce in a factory, and the factory initially need a capital, and the owner of the factory is a capitalist, and the worker here is a worker. Okay, so this need urbanization. It's not tied to the land anymore. It's tied to the capital. So the exploitation of worker change from land lease tax to wages. And what wages is, say, according to Marcus, a $100 product factory produce, maybe $20 is material and $40 is labor. The factory profit is $40 and worker get $40. Okay, so worker actually worked $80 worth, but capitalists take $40, and this is an exploitation. And according to Marcus, this is a conflict of two conflicting entity, capitalist and worker. And this system is different from feudalism. It changed to the capitalism, and conflict exists. And when what's the quantity for driving this is productivity. And productivity keep increasing, and this $40 exploitation become huge. So billionaire become even richer, and the worker stay poor. Okay, so this is a two conflicting party, and productivity drives conflict even more and more. For example, computer is introduced, then capitalists can cut the cost using computer, then worker lose job or wages reduced. Okay, so the conflict increase in the capitalism. It's a built-in system, internal matter. Okay, and here comes the socialism. The socialism is public ownership of capital. So there's no more capitalist. So what's happened is capitalists disappear, and all the worker is a part of shareholder. It's only government and the citizen. And here exploitation is tax. Citizens still need to pay tax, but under the large productivity, tax will be very minor amount. And when robotics introduced, what's happened in the socialism? The people work less hours. And under capitalist, people lose job. Under socialism, when robotics come in and AI come in, productivity increase, what happened is all the benefit is shared. So people work less for same wages. But in the capitalist, lose job, reduction of workforce because of the AI and the robotics. Okay? And utopian ideas Marx mentioned is communism. Due to the increase of productivity, this tax disappear. So it's become irrelevant because productivity is so high. So everybody said, oh, communist. Is no nation is communist until productivity increase beyond socialism level. This is the view of the historic dialectic materialism. Okay, so here the quantity is productivity, and productivity is the driving force. Okay, so last example, the misspelling again. Space evolution. Now, space, the started with minimum entropy state, Big Bang, and the beginning of space, and that space include time, and the Big Bang to expand. So what happened is at this stage, the contradicting factor is energy and gravity, and even there is a gravity to combine everything, but energy was so big, so it had a tremendous expansion, the Big Bang. But the contracting force exists after space cool off and more material is created. The sun burn off all the fuel and explode, supernova, and create all kind of material like gold, silver, the stuff you like, and also uranium, very big atoms. And big atoms, all the energy is convert it to the gravity mass, which is gravity. So gradually gravity start taking over. Okay, at that time entropy increased so much, and we don't know what the end of the time like. That's a physics people's job to find out. But this is perfectly the example of historical dialectical materialism. The opposing contradicting force is the energy for expansion and the gravity. And Einstein's equation for cosmos depict that very well. He has adjusting lambda parameter there, depending on who is stronger, energy or gravity, right? And that determines whether universe is expanding or contracting. Okay, so here, what is a quantity? Well, scientists guess it's entropy. Entropy keep increasing, and entropy increase to a certain point, then some qualitative change happen in the space, which we don't know yet. Okay, so this historical dialectical materialism is the very important part of the physics philosophy. It's a philosophy level. You cannot talk about quantity equation and verify down to decimal point below 3-digit below decimal point kind of things. It's a philosophy. Okay, but the very important part of you must understand, so that you can, when you learn the physics, you know the foundation of the physics. Okay, thanks for listening.